Right. I am a humanities librarian and cinema studies subject specialist at the University of Oregon Libraries. And I am going to be talking through various things today. What I'd like to start with, though, is a little icebreaker question. Which of these films won the Oscar for Best Picture in the year that it came out? And I'd like you to see if you can answer this without looking them up, and put your answer in the chat. We'll see how many of us can get this right.
Seeing lots of none. Have one guess of Apocalypse Now. Someone says all of them. No idea. Apocalypse Now. A few don't knows.
So the answer is a trick question. As many of you guessed, that actually none of them won Best Picture in the year that they came out, despite having a long reputation now of being on top 100 lists and being, you know, the luminaries of our film history. And I think also the fact that many of us didn't know at all is also kind of underscores the point that I want to make with this question, which is that many of the films that dominate our film history, or the narratives that we have about our film history, are not always the ones that were most popular at the time they came out. They're not always the ones that have the most documentation about them. They're not the ones that continue to be played on our various platforms and streaming services and come out on DVD later. And more to the point, the movies that we remember are not always the ones that have awards, but our students that we're working with are often assigned to research films for which they have no knowledge. They have no frame of reference for them. And so the assumptions that we might be able to make about this kind of shared cultural history, we can't make those assumptions of our students as well. Because for the average age of students that we're dealing with now, an old movie came out in the 80s. So to have them do research on films that came out 80 years ago is much more of a challenge. So the other issue that is a theme that I want to emphasize today is that one of the challenges of finding relevant film studies resources, there are just so many possibilities. So the affordances of digital tools and the democratization of digitization, digital production means, and as well as open access movement, have all contributed.
Microphone?
Can you hear me?
You're back, yeah, thanks.
Okay. I hope that I was heard when I was making my big smart speech about the abundance of digital tools and digital collections, digital materials. The result of all of this abundance that we enjoy is also fragmentation. So we can't assume that we can just go to our library or to one place and be able to find all of these things. The real challenge lies in our discovery of these materials. There's no one unified search tool for them. And the diversity of sources means that we have to work harder to find them than we would for materials that we purchase or license for our libraries, in which we can include in our local discovery systems. Nonetheless, they're out there, and so I'm going to be covering some of them today, a selection of them. Advancing my slides. Okay, so what I would like you all to take away from our session today, I have several goals. My hope is that you will have an introduction to understanding approaches to film studies, that you'll get a sense of how to find credible background information on films, get a sense of how to find digital collections of primary sources for film history, how to find open access scholarship on for film studies, and find free streaming video. So just a word about my selection of sources today. I selected them with my kind of evaluation checklist in mind. So I'm looking for things that have credibility, that have an academic affiliation. I'm looking for scholars who are contributing to the materials or to the platform itself, adding to authority of it. And I'm also looking for things that will have a stability, that will be persistent. There are lots of fan sites, lots of crowdsourced kinds of places on the internet. I'm looking for things that have more of a scholarly infrastructure to them. So either an academic affiliation or an institutional affiliation. So first I want to start with approaches to film study. This is going to frame how I'm going to talk about the sources today and the searching that I'm going to be providing. So with any kind of research topic or project, we're thinking about what are all the things we need to know to make an argument, and what evidence do we need to do that. So I wanted to introduce this idea of these basic approaches to film studies, which was written about by David Bordwell, professor of film studies, a film historian, who coincidentally has a very great authoritative website of his own scholarship that he maintains. He did an article called Doing Film History in 2008, where he laid out these kind of basic approaches. These are not the only approaches to doing film studies, but they're a helpful way to think about intentional ways of framing an argument and looking for information about these different areas. So a biographical approach would focus on an individual's life history. An industrial economic approach focuses on the business practices of making films. An aesthetic approach is looking at the film form, its style, what it looks like, what it sounds like, or its genre. A technological approach is going to focus on the materials and machines of films, so cameras, sound equipment, etc. A social or cultural political approach is going to focus on the role of cinema in larger society as a cultural object. So these often will overlap. So for example, Thomas Edison had a role in technological developments, but we may also look at his life and how those two things intersected. So these are, as I said, helpful ways to kind of think intentionally about how you want to come at working on a topic. The other framing device that I like to think about and that I encourage students to think about too is this idea that if every film has a life cycle. So it moves through this chain of sort of moments in its life, starting with its production, which includes pre-production, actual production, and post-production. There's quite a few elements there, as I'll go into detail in a moment. And then it moves into distribution, so it gets sent out into the world. Maybe it's on film, maybe it's on DVD, maybe it's a digital file, maybe it starts out in New York and then it gets sent out to the rest of the world. Exhibition includes the venues where films are seen. So that has traditionally been in a theater, but it also includes classrooms and airplanes and doctors' offices, and lots of other what we call non-theatrical exhibition venues. It also includes our living rooms and our phones. Reception is how a film is received. So by audiences, but also by critics and scholars. It also would include awards that films have received. And then going down, if a film has a longer life beyond its original release and has the benefit of being preserved, say by the studio that created it or an archive, then it has the potential for reuse. And then the cycle begins again. So imagine It's a Wonderful Life that originally came out in the 1930s, 1940s. Sorry, I had the date on there on my first slide. And then it went on to have a life on television, and we got to see it every year at Christmas. And so it continues to kind of move through this circulation in our world. So not every film makes it through this cycle. Sometimes it just goes into a vault and stays there. So what's important about thinking about this life cycle of a film is that for each point in this life cycle, information is being created. Information is being created by the producers who are making the film, the distributors who are sending it out, the theaters who are showing the film, the newspapers that are printing the reviews of the films, the archives that are preserving the films, etc. So what I want students to think about is if you were looking at a particular aspect of this life cycle of the film, you want to know how was it received? You want to think about what information would be created at that point, and then where would it be distributed and shared? All right, so I want to go a little bit more in detail about the production phase of the life cycle, because this is where there's a lot of different aspects that are not immediately straightforward when we think of production. So it can involve the screenplay, the adaptation that it might have come from, original source material as a play or as a book. It involves hiring the crew, deciding locations, equipment that might need to be purchased or rented, choosing what equipment to use, how the film was made, so the cinematography, what sound equipment might have been used if it was made during the sound era, costumes, makeup, hair, how a film was promoted to try to attract audiences. So there's lots of aspects within just this realm, all of which is creating information. So we can find from studio records, from industry publications, from fan magazines, lots of different places to find primary sources related to this, but then also secondary sources that are commenting on it. So again, I want students to be thinking explicitly about all these different aspects and not just this kind of broad production phase. All right, so the first source that I want to talk about is the AFI Catalog of Feature Films. This is a tool that was originally published by the American Film Institute in 1972, and it was intended to be a catalog of all of the films, Hollywood films, made in the United States, starting at the birth of cinema up to 1972 when it came out. So these would be profiles and lists of crew and contributors to all films, all Hollywood feature films made in the United States. So the contents are written by film scholars using primary sources, and it's a wealth of information. So it has this kind of authoritative infrastructure that I'm looking for when I want to recommend this to students to use. So it has been a subscription database in the past, and the Margaret Herrick Library that hosts this has recently made it all available for free. So one of the real strengths of this database, because you may notice it seems similar to the Internet Movie Database in terms of it providing all of the credits and crew. These synopses that it provides, Internet Movie Database is not always very consistent with synopses because it's crowdsourced. But the real strength of this database is the histories, the production histories that it provides. Sometimes you can get these things in Wikipedia, but as I say, all of this is in one place in the AFI catalog, and it's a reliable kind of set of information. So the production histories are based on the source citations that are also included there of primary sources. And so they were written with information, the sources that were available at the time. So these could be expanded based on the fact that there are more digital collections and digitized primary sources now. But it's a great way for students and researchers to get an overview of how the film got made. So you often hear about how directors were chosen, specifics about the technical aspects of the film, the budgets, any kind of controversies that came about. So this is a little snapshot of the entry on Rope, Alfred Hitchcock movie from 1948, which is, it's known for having the look as if it was one continuous take, as if there's no breaks and no cuts in the film at all. In fact, there were cuts in it, as the production history describes, but it also talks about how they managed to make it look that way. And as I said, this entry was written using those source citations. So the next step in the research process would be to, let's go find some of those sources and see if they're available and see how well they provide evidence and how a researcher or a student might expand on them. So the next source that I want to talk about is the Media History Digital Library, which is an amazing digital collection. It was originally started by a film historian at University of Wisconsin and a developer. And they started it just as a scholarly project of digitizing early film industry publications, including fan magazines. And it's hosted by the Internet Archive. And it covers 19th century up to about 1963. It's not comprehensive for every publication in there. That is kind of a moving wall based on copyright status. But it includes publications like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Film Daily, Photoplay. I'm going to show some examples. It can be used for all different aspects of the film, the life cycle of a film. So it's useful for production information, all those different aspects of production. It's useful for distribution and exhibition and reviews, theater reports. So what was showing in a given theater in any part of the United States, for example, and lots of information about publicity and promotion. So it's got advertisements for the movies, advertisements for studios, for different kinds of equipment. So it's very, very rich. One example I'm going to show here is that article from American Cinematographer about Rope. So what I'm showing you here is the way that the items display in the Internet Archive, where it gives you, it simulates a kind of print environment where you can flip the pages back and forth. You can search through this entire publication. You can make it bigger, and then you can zero in on the specific article. So this is a close-up on that article we just looked at, and you can see that it's written, this is from American Cinematographer, so the audience for this article is other people working in cinematography and cameramen. So it's talking specifically about how they managed to accomplish the illusion of not having any cuts. They had moving walls, they had dolly shots, and we'll talk a minute about how we find out what a dolly shot actually is. So this is an example of if you were taking a technological approach to studying Rope, this would be perhaps evidence to support an argument related to that approach. So this is another example of the kind of thing that you can find in the Media History Digital Library. This is a fan magazine. There are a number of them in the database. This is Modern Screen. And this is a close-up of an article that appeared in 1942, Eaten Out with Ease, about a huge star at the time, Bette Davis, who coincidentally had a movie coming out that summer called Now Voyager. And the article is all about how she loves to barbecue in her backyard and she loves to have friends over. It's very informal and she's so great at making hamburgers. And if this sounds a lot like Stars, They're Just Like Us, you're right. This was all over the fan magazines in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s as a way to promote a film that's coming out, but also to promote the star herself. So to make her seem accessible and relatable and knowable and yet still unavailable. I thought it was also interesting, you see the close-up on the text there in the bottom right corner of the screen, that the article said this bids fair to be known as the summer of the stay-at-homes, which I thought was resonant given our time right now. And I wondered if there was some restrictions on travel related to World War II. And this is where I would like additional context to know what was going on and how important it might have been to go to the movies to get an escape when you might not have been able to travel farther away from home. So again, this is an example of promotional or publicity material where it's the audience for this is the average moviegoer. It's also an example of what if you were taking a biographical approach or an industry approach of how you construct a star. So star studies is an important aspect of film studies. How we create stars and how we consume them, how they manage their personas. And in this era of 1942, information about stars was rigidly controlled by the studios during the studio era. So an article like this may have actually been written by the studio's own publicity department and deliberately placed in a fan magazine like this to generate interest in both the film and in Bette Davis herself. So it's not really there to sell the idea of backyard barbecues, right? It's there to sell the idea of Bette Davis and the idea of going to the movie. So if one were taking a biographical or an industrial approach, this could be a piece of evidence for that, because a star is part of the industry that is Hollywood. The next source that I'd like to talk about is a digital collection available at the Margaret Herrick Library, which is the special library affiliated with the Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles. They have many amazing digital collections, including photographs and manuscript collections, of which they have digitized and made available through their website, which I have here on the slide. The one collection that I want to talk about today is the Production Code Administration records. So briefly, the Production Code was a set of industry guidelines that spelled out what was acceptable and unacceptable content in Hollywood feature films. So this predated our current rating system, and it was established in the late 20s, early 30s as a way to regulate the content of Hollywood films. So prior to that, there were state and local censor boards. Portland had a very active censor board, for example, but there was nothing national prior to the Production Code. And there was concern from religious groups and parent groups, you know, concerned mothers kinds of things, about the movie's representations of sexuality, of criminality, of what they considered objectionable behavior. They thought the movies were too sexy, too indecent, harmful to children. And they were able to get the Production Code Administration established. And what it meant that every Hollywood script that was up for production had to be reviewed and approved by the Production Code. And once they were approved, they got a number, the PCA code. And that showed that it was available to be or approved to be produced. So the guidelines in the production code, which is also available in full text digitally from the Margaret Herrick Library, included a long list of things, such as including no interracial relationships, no homosexuality, no positive representations of criminal behavior. So you could have criminals, they just couldn't get away with it or have a nice life. There could be Christianity, nothing that would ridicule Christianity. Just some examples. So if you've ever wondered why married couples slept in twin beds, or why kisses were so short in movies from the 50s, that's because of the production code. So what is available in these dossiers, and there are 500 films represented in this collection, and it covers 1930 to 1968 when the rating system was established, is correspondence between the studio and the production code administration staff, and often very, very specific granular feedback, requests, demands to change the content of the scripts. The dossiers also include sometimes clippings, so digitized reviews from various newspapers. So it's much more than just the back and forth between the producers and the production code staff. This is an example of the dossier from Rope, the Hitchcock movie. So on the left, we see the initial letter from a producer, a production assistant from the studio to Joseph Breen, who was he headed up the production code administration. So he's submitting the screenplay. The movie this is pre-production. Here's my script. Please take a look at it and see what you think. And on the right side are some blow-ups of samples from the feedback that the producers received about the film, about the script, I should say. So the first one, in this connection, we urge the advisability of omitting entirely the derisive treatments of the 10 Commandments on pages 62 and 63. This would undoubtedly give great offense to motion picture audiences. The next one, in preparing your screenplay, we suggest the possibility of omitting a lot of the emphasis on and dialogue about liquor and drinking. You agreed that you would be willing to change any specific lines of dialogue that might reflect a homosexual relationship between these two characters. And then the last one is suggesting that we don't want crime to seem too exciting. We want to make sure that these people who committed this murder in the movie, that they really shouldn't feel too good about it. So this is a fascinating glimpse into the ways that Hollywood was subjecting itself to this kind of self-censorship and regulation, and how a script might have had to evolve over its process, and the kind of objections that would have been raised. But it also can show how a producer or a screenwriter director can work within these constraints to still try to achieve their goals with their films. All right, so moving on, the next source I'd like to talk about is a background source for folks doing an aesthetic approach to studying a film, or to just getting an understanding of what we mean when we throw around words like dolly shots and tracking shots, or any other kinds of those key terms in film studies, what we mean when we talk about the cinematic language of film. This is a project that was created by Columbia University and is hosted by the university. And it is like an encyclopedia of film language with entries written by film scholars. So they are authored and they're illustrated with clips that show what they're talking about. And then the clips themselves have commentary by scholars. I'm going to show you an example of one of these. This is just a snippet from the entry on close-up when we go in close. And this is much longer than just the snippet that I've provided here. It provides a history and then evolution over time. And this is, the entry itself has about 5 different clips to illustrate this concept. This is just one of them.
A really interesting dialectic in the use of close-ups is the dialectic between, on the one hand, really getting a sense of the reality of the performer's face. And here you see Elmer Booth right there looking at us and looking around the corner, but also the presence of the camera. So it's both realistic and fantastic.
The Columbia Film Language Glossary is not the only thing that does what it does. There are other projects like this out on the web. But as I said, this is one that I choose because it is, entries are authored, the audio commentary is by film scholars, it has excellent metadata, and it's going to have the stability and persistence of a tool that's hosted by a university. And this is a tool, this project that is being used right now in our media aesthetics classes at University of Oregon. Right, moving on. These are another collection of digital primary sources. I'm sure you're all aware of Chronicling America, a database of digitized American newspapers hosted by the Library of Congress. Many local state-based newspaper projects are also visible, searchable within the Chronicling America interface. There also can be separate, such as the Historic Oregon Newspapers Project, which we have at the University of Oregon. You can search both our standalone database, but you can also search within Chronicling America. And the benefit of searching through all of those newspapers all at one time for film studies is the ability to see how, for example, a film might have been distributed or exhibited in different states across the United States, how films were received in different regions and cities, both small and large. The search interface is excellent. It has the ability to make screen grabs and PDFs. The metadata is excellent. This is, let's look at an example of kind of the potential for film studies with newspapers. So when I'm doing instruction with students, I'll often do a primary source analysis activity where I'll just give them an ad from a newspaper, and I'll give them information, at least where it appeared and when it appeared. You can see from the citation along the side that this is from the Historic Oregon Newspapers collection. So this ad appeared in the Oregon Statesman out of Salem, Oregon in 1927. And then I ask students to just try to make sense of it. What are they looking at? So what can we know about this film or about the theater where it showed? What does it tell us about how this film was, how it was exhibited? So we can know, for example, up in the left corner of the ad that it appeared at the Elsinore. So we can know that there was a theater in Salem called the Elsinore, which is still there, that it played 2 days, today and Monday. We can also see that the artwork here may or may not have been created by the newspaper itself. Maybe it came from a studio. It looks pretty stylized. We can also see what it cost to get into the movies in 1927 at the Elsinore. We can also see that this is a movie that was made in Cottage Grove, Oregon, and that there was an orchestra playing at this. So, and some days, and then there was somebody on the Wurlitzer. So it was a silent film, but there was musical accompaniment. So with a little bit more context, we can make even more meaning out of this ad. So up in the left corner are the actual release dates, and then the national release dates, which I got from the American Film Institute catalog. So I learned from that the movie was originally released in December of 1926. And it was released nationally in February of 1927, but you can see the ad for the Elsinore showing was from January 1927. And I don't know what to make of that yet. I need more context and information to help me make sense of why did we get it before everyone else, in Salem at least. Is it because of the Cottage Grove connection? It'd be interesting to pursue that. Why would a small movie market be able to get this film before anybody else did nationally? And then we can also see by searching across all of the content in Chronicling America, an ad like this one from a theater in Tucson, Arizona. This one was from May 17th, so this was more part of that national rollout of the film. That it was, I interpret this as a theater that was for the Spanish-speaking community, that the general played there. And I'd be interested to know too, were there Spanish subtitles or intertitles in that version of the film? Knowing that this film played to both audiences, English-speaking audiences in Salem, Oregon, and Spanish-speaking audiences in Tucson, Arizona, gives us a sense of that exhibition and audiences and a sense of reception for this film. We can also see from the ad in Tucson that there was more going on. There was more programming happening at this theater than just that film. There was vaudeville, and then another movie called Padlocked. So the general might have been a big deal, but it wasn't the only thing that was going on at this theater. There was lots of other kinds of programming. We can also see how much it cost to see the film at this theater. We can also see ads for one particular film as it was rolled out across the United States. These are ads for Birth of a Nation, which came out in 1916. And you can see just visually that they used similar design. Presumably this was provided by the studio. And not just the design of that circle, but some of the same language you'll see in ads no matter where the film was showing. So some of the same language like eighth wonder of the world, a mighty spectacle, you may never see it again, the world's greatest, most successful American play. Some of these ads were enormous relative to the size of the page that they appeared on. In the bottom left corner is a story that appeared on the front page of the Northern Wyoming Herald when the movie played in town. That was a news story about what audiences apparently thought about the film, but it uses some of the same language, this message of peace, the eighth wonder of the world that is you still see in these ads that appeared elsewhere in the country. So one could create an argument here, seeing all of this kind of this data about how the studio that released the film created this kind of narrative about the film itself, that it told a story about itself and then it got the country talking about, telling the same story about it. And the result of that is this kind of dominant narrative about Birth of a Nation, that it is this amazing technical achievement, that it is this amazing story of peace. And of course, Birth of a Nation was considered one of the greatest films ever made until more recently, when we really had to come to grips with how offensive and wrong the actual story of it is, regardless of its technical achievements. And in fact, one of the great benefits of a database like Chronicling America is our ability to see other newspapers that were not part of this dominant narrative. So this is an African-American newspaper from Nebraska, and there were many other stories like this in African-American press protesting against the release and exhibition of Birth of a Nation in their towns, and really trying to resist having this movie in circulation. And that occurred in Portland as well, in Oregon. So it's really helpful, I think, to see not just information that confirms what we think our history of a film is, but also the ability to see information that would upend those dominant narratives. All right, moving on to additional digital primary sources. These would be digital books, pamphlets, reports, government documents. I'm sure you're all aware of HathiTrust. Libraries can have memberships to this, but lots of their content is just free to anyone. One example of the kinds of things that you can find in here is this report that came out in 1914 called Vaudeville and Motion Picture Shows. It was an amazing study of theaters and movie going in Portland in 1914. It gives incredible data about how often children went to the movies, for example, and what kinds of things people were seeing in movie theaters in Portland. Just one example of the thousands of things that are available in HathiTrust. So don't forget about this when you're thinking about finding primary sources for film studies. And of course, the Internet Archive, it has millions of digitized books and pamphlets and directories, and your ability to narrow your search to things just having to do with motion pictures is really great. And you get that same interface that I demonstrated with the American Cinematographer, where you can flip the pages back and forth and search across all of the publications. So now I want to move on to open access scholarly sources. We of course have many things available through our local discovery services, but if you're in a library that doesn't have the benefit of a kind of cataloging department that is able to bring metadata from these directories of open access books and journals into your catalog, it's important to know that these are out there, and your ability to search them and search by topic and find specific articles and books. This is an example of, over on the right, of a journal that's available through the Open Library of Humanities. The downside of these kind of standalone projects is we want to be able to search through all of them simultaneously and see all the content that's available. You have to search them one-on-one unless you've been able to bring them into your local discovery system. But there is an increasing number of peer-reviewed, high-quality scholarly books and journals that are available just out on the free web. And also sources like OASIS, which provides open education resources, so courses and course materials that can be freely reused for anyone. So some examples of the extent and quality of materials available in these platforms. In the Directory of Open Access Journals, there's really great international representation. This is Cinema Comparative, which is a European journal. Down in the bottom left corner, this is an example from the Directory of Open Access Books. Great variety from university presses that are all freely available. And then up in the right corner there, a screenshot from OASIS, which has the free course materials, 2 examples of open courseware related to the study of cinema from different points of view, all freely available. Now, free streaming video. I suspect some of you may have come just for this part of the presentation. It's a big question, something that I get asked all the time. I get asked, where's the specific film? But I also get asked, where's all the film? So this is the streaming video aspect of the life cycle of films would be, you know, as a film has moved through its initial release and then it has this afterlife. So a movie that's now streaming on Turner Classic Movies, or that's in an archive and has been digitized and is now available. And these would be non-commercial platforms. So we're not talking about Netflix or HBO Max. These are places where you can find free streaming video. And So it can start to feel like, oh my gosh, everything is locked away in these commercial platforms. Where can I find what I need? And in fact, there are almost so many that it can feel overwhelming. Like, wow, actually everything is out there. But in fact, everything, there's no such thing as everything with any of this. That there is this incredible abundance, but there is still, everything is not out there. So I think it's important to be thinking about when we're looking for streaming video, to know that people, again, are looking for an individual film. So where can I find Casablanca? And where can I find just like a list of recommended places to go? I rely on other experts. There are librarians and there are libraries and websites that are really trying to keep track of all of the places where streaming video is being collected. So collections of streaming video, and but also individual movies. So for example, the Video Roundtable group in ALA maintains a website where they're up to date and they maintain it of collections. And so this is a way to try to like navigate through what are what exists and what might be relevant for my users. I've just included 4 right here. There are some really great libguides out there that lists other kinds of things. The top 2 are the ones that I go to most frequently to keep track of new collections that are coming out. And the Video Lib listserv is also excellent, as well as the Association of Moving Image Archivists is a good way to become aware of new collections and new videos and new archives that are coming out. So the abundance of free streaming film, which often is not Hollywood films. So Casablanca, for example, is not easy to find free because it is still benefiting from the economic industrial context of Hollywood. So it still has an economic long tail. In other words, they can still profit off of it by having it, by licensing it to Turner Classic Movies or Netflix. But the abundance of streaming video out there really represents the scope and variety of filmmaking that goes far beyond Hollywood feature films. So it's educational films and training and advertising films, home movies, travelogues, scientific films, documentaries, newsreels, news, public service announcements, all these kinds of films that represent our film heritage, but that are not necessarily what we think of when we think of like the movies. So it's important to be thinking about that as you're navigating where the streaming, where the video might be. So the other challenge with any of these curated lists is you still have to drill down to the specific. So for example, you might start by looking at the list provided by the Video Roundtable group. And within that list, you'll see a link to the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. And then within that collection, you might browse down to the public news events commentary show called Black Journal, which was this amazing show that came out in 1968. That was public affairs programming, had interviews and conversations. And within that collection, then you would drill down further to a specific episode. For example, one called The Black Woman, which came out in 1970. And then you might drill down even further to a specific clip within that Black Journal. So a researcher might be looking for something that leads you eventually to that clip. So there isn't an easy way to start your search by searching for that clip. You kind of have to go through the top level collection and then drill down. So those are all of the challenges, but it's worthwhile. There's, I recommend you browse some of the lists that are there to get a sense of the scope and variety. I thought I would show a couple of clips for your viewing pleasure to show you some of the examples that are out there. This one is a clip from a film called Calling Blighty, which was produced during World War II of soldiers overseas in World War II to send home and shown in local theater. So these were messages that were recorded for folks at home.
Hello, Norwich, and hello, Mum. I hope you're keeping fit and well. Also, Peter and Joan. As you can see for yourself, I'm okay. Give all my regards to all relations and friends. Cheerio for now, and all my love. Well, here's Bob to say farewell to his people. Come on, Bob.
Hello, Lightning. Hello, Mother. I bet you are surprised. I'm in the pink as you can see. I hope you are the same. My mail as good as possible. Cheerio, bags of love. Here's Kerry want to speak to you.
Hiya, Norwich. Hiya, sis. I hope you're all well. You can see for yourself that I'm okay, you lucky people. Tell little Jody to keep a pecker up, and by gosh, can I do the pint of bullets now? Well, there's one thing, whatever I say to you now, you can't answer me back, can you? Well, cheerio, keep smiling, I'll be seeing you. Come on, Billy.
Hello, Mum and Dad. It's great to have this opportunity of saying hello to you. I'm keeping pretty well myself, and I trust you are also. Give my love to Sister Bet and Brother Tom, and also my darling Pat. So God bless you all, and may we meet again soon. Now we have Vic to see you.
Hello, darling. How are you? It's a great thrill to be able to talk to you like this. How's Patricia? I'm getting your mail very regular. Keeping pretty fit and well, so don't worry too much. God bless you, dear. Love to Mum and Agnes. God bless you all. Come on, Stanley.
I love this movies. There were several of them. I love these movies so much because of the intimacy of the speakers and the way that we've been all having to be remote for the last year, imagining what it must have been like at this time to get these kind of messages in your own local theater. I have another one I'd like to show. This is from the UCLA Film and Television Archive. This is a comedy variety show called In the Life, which was made by and for LGBTQ folks in the early 90s. UCLA Film and Television Archive has preserved it and digitized the episodes. And this is, they made like Saturday Night Live, they would make these spoof commercials, as well as having stand-up comedy routines and interviews. So I wanted to show you this one as an example of what's available in that collection.
Has this ever happened to you?
She's baking tofu, has short hair, and she's wearing Birkenstocks.
Or this?
He knows all the words to cabaret.
Now you can kiss those embarrassing moments goodbye forever with new Gaydar, the patented detection system that lets you know for sure just who is and isn't gay. Gaydar goes everywhere, to your favorite restaurant, to the movies, to the office, even to family reunions. Dad? Wear it when you're exercising. Or just wear it around the house.
Fifi.
New Gaydar, handy, lightweight, foolproof, and available in 12 fashion colors. Order Gaydar now and join a family of satisfied customers.
I found a lover.
I found a softball team.
Don't spend another second wondering. Get Gaydar now. Only $49.95, not available to right-wing senators or television evangelists. New Gaydar, because after all, we are everywhere.
The last one I want to show is a campaign commercial that's available as part of the Living Room Candidate Presidential Campaign Commercials collection at the Museum of the Moving Image.
Think about it. When the decisions of one man can affect the future of your family for generations to come, what kind of a man do you want making those decisions? Think about it. Who is the one man who has the experience and the qualifications to lead America in these troubled, dangerous times? Nixon's the one.
That concludes my overview. Before we pause to take questions, I do want to point out, as you see the URL here, I have created a LibGuide that has links and descriptions of the things that I've covered today. And I'd be happy to show that to the group if necessary. You can just write it down. I wanted to make sure that these things would be available to you after we leave today.